silence. The big silence.
All right. And welcome to the official episode number 1 of the Big Silence Mental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Karena Dawn, and I'm so excited to have you here. We are coming from Austin, Texas. So I just got home yesterday. We were in Florida for a Daytona 24 race. If you don't know me well enough, you know that especially Bobby loves racing and race cars and all those things. So we were there with some of our friends for a 24-hour race. Let me tell you, I'm tired. You stay up for 24 hours. We took naps like here and there. And then we found out there was a storm coming to Texas. So we needed to drive our RV that we were living in back to Texas before the storm came so we could get home to our Pomeranians. And Bobby did another 24-hour round. You feel good about that, Bobby?
I feel great.
He feels great. He feels good. I know. He just pointed out to me. He's like, you have a bag under your eye. I'm like, yeah, that's okay.
It was for lighting purposes.
Oh, for lighting.
Not being critical. It's just I'm in charge of lighting. God, you're really making me look bad.
I'm not making you look bad. I do have a bag under my eye. Anyways, I wanted to have this solo pod conversation. I'm so happy we made it home safely. The roads are awful out there, and I think this storm spread across like 20 states. So I hope you are doing well at home and everything is good. But I wanted to talk about why I'm doing this podcast and give a little background on myself. So I never intended on doing a podcast. I'll be honest, I was very anti. And because I have so much going on between Tone It Up and we work in real estate and other ventures that we're doing, and I also my nonprofit work. And then one day, it was about a year ago, I posted something about what women wanted to know more about in our community, between my community and Tone It Up's. What do you need? And I was I'm going to use the word I never use, flabbergasted. Bobby's face, he's like, flabbergasted? That sounds like what you do in bed at night. No, but honestly, I literally printed this out of the DMs I got of what women really want to talk about and what's not being heard and what's not being talked about, which is the silence, the big silence. Like, why did I name it the big silence? It's the things that everyone's too scared to talk about. And it's all about mental health and the stigma and why we need to open up these conversations, because more than ever, we all need to come together. So I opened up my DMs one morning, and if you're watching the video here, I have a list of 2 pages of things. And this is just, I had women who were sending multiple things, and it's all the same things. And I'm not even going to read them all out, but how to care and support others with a mental health condition, which I am going to do an episode on that and include Bobby, because I've had a lot of DMs about my spouse doesn't understand living with someone with a mental health condition. And Bobby had to really step into a world that he was unknown, like he just didn't know about. So we took a 13-week course with NAMI, who to educate him and me on how to deal with a family member with a mental health condition. We have dealing with anxiety, binge eating and eating disorders, talking about therapy openly, children and depression, more meditations on stress, anxiety, inner child work. I love inner child work. I have someone great that I'm going to bring on for that, who has really helped me with my inner child work. How to let go of fear, how to deal with mom guilt, normalizing therapy. I love that. Suicide, conversations about having suicide, ideations, which, by the way, as I mentioned suicide, I just want to throw out there that Big Silence has a crisis line. You text HERO to 741-741, and it's anonymous, and you will be connected with someone who can help you. So please, 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 if you're listening to this, it's a really, I don't even know how to describe the term of what the world is in right now, but it's a tough place. There's a lot of severe depression and suicide. And in this list from our community, so many times suicide is mentioned. Please text 741-741, the word HERO, and you will have help. The other things are how to avoid burnout, imposter syndrome, stress and finances, parentification. I love that conversation because I've had to learn in my story and my growing up about parentification, where you start taking care of your parents. But I hear all this. DM at the Big Silence to let me know more of what you want to talk about. We are here for you. And this is such a passion project for me. And I will go into a story of why. So, if you don't know already, I grew up with a mother who was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic and suffered from depression. She was diagnosed when I was 12 years old, and I'm 40 now, just so you get the timeline. And she also suffered from a childhood with a father who was schizophrenic and committed suicide when she was 18. And so she never really got the work or the therapy to support her through all of those emotions. So she carried that with her entire life. I mean, imagine carrying that grief, that trauma, and never doing the work and never talking about it, because it was something you just don't talk about in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, right? So in the 90s, when my mom was diagnosed, I didn't know what a mental health condition or mental illness or disease was. And I went to the library and I found books about schizophrenia and all of this and educated myself on it. But at the same time, I was feeling very lost and alone because none of my friends knew what was going on in my household. And I kind of just, went under a rock, I would say. A rock of partying, drug use, skipping school. And, it was a very, very dark, lonely time. I had friends around me that were doing the same things. But now when I think back, maybe those friends that were doing the same things as me, going to rave parties, I mean, trust me, those were some fun times. But we were all escaping something. Like, what was it? And none of us really talked about what was going on in home. We were just there escaping. And maybe those other friends in my high school years were going through the same thing, but we didn't know how to talk about it. So, that escapism is a part of coping. And so I just wish that back then we were talking more, because then that led me to my mom being a missing persons for many years, or many times through the years, and in the hospital, and my own suicide attempt. There was one night that I was hanging out with my friends, and my parents were fighting at home. My mom had been gone, and I decided I didn't want to live anymore. Yeah. And so I took a bottle of pills, took some, I believe it was rum. I was at my friend's house whose mom was a nurse, so she had lots of prescription pills in there, in that cabinet upstairs in that bathroom. And I decided I was done with it. And I did it. And then I was found on the floor by a friend's parent who called my parents, and my heart stopped. My stomach was pumped. I was taken to a hospital, and I'm getting very vulnerable here, so I might cry, but I'm just saying, like, I remember my mom holding me, and I said to her, I just want to go see Jesus. I want to go to heaven. All I can say is, I am so grateful I'm alive. I am so grateful I'm alive so that we can take the big silence and save those teenagers that didn't know what was going on, that didn't have a source, a resource, a friend, a hand to hold, and we can save their lives. I'm sorry, this is not how I wanted the podcast to go, but I'm just being very raw and going back in those days of we weren't talking about it. I mean, how many kids are out there right now suffering because they're not talking about it and they don't know. They don't know that they have friends, they have people that want to help, that they're not alone. So that's what the big silence is, and all of my other mental health partners. We're just here. We're just here making this stop. We're here making this world a better place. So as we talk about different topics on the big silence, we together as a community are raising our voices. We are speaking up. We are making noise. We're saying it's okay to not be okay. We are saving lives together. And that is what the big silence is. And one other thing. So my mother, as I mentioned, was paranoid schizophrenic. And in my memoir that's coming out in April this year, 2022, you can read the whole story about it. And it's all about mother-daughter relationships and all of that. But my mother passed away in September 2021. I had the privilege to spend 3 days with her while she was in hospice and talk to her. And, you know, she was always speaking about regret. And she always had that stigma. She hated that I was doing work with NAMI, which is National Alliance of Mental Illness. They've been around for 40 years. They're amazing, an amazing resource. But she was always like, no, don't let people know that I have a mental health condition because of the stigma. They'll think I'm crazy. And the day before she passed on this earth, she said to me, she said, it's not just my physical health, it's my mental health. Finally, she was able to admit that because of the stigma. But she admitted it to me, and I told her as I was holding her hand and brushing her hair, I said, me and my sister have started the Big Silence Foundation to break the stigma. And I told my mom, I said, your legacy is going to live on because your story, my sister and I are starting this foundation and the memoir is coming out, and your story is going to save so many lives. So here's to Linda Joy Tompkins, my mom. And I also let her know that she raised a really fucking awesome daughter. So here we are together as a community. Let's do this. Let's break the stigma. Let's help everyone around us. Let's stop all of the mental health conditions and the suicides that are going on. We are here together. And I look forward to hanging out with you every single Wednesday. All right, let's go.
The big silence. The big silence. The big silence.